All right, guys, we're back, and it's MAPD724 in the winter 2018 semester. That's Advanced iOS Programming at Centennial, and we're week 7, part 2 of our broadcast, iOS UIs with Unity continued. All right, so one thing I've done is I've put up the project up on GitHub. If you go to Centennial College, this one, I'm just going to grab this and put it up on Slack. So I'm going to go to Slack, and here's this one. And we're going to go to General. There's the General tab, and we're just going to paste this in. All right, there we go. So that is going to be your link to GitHub if you want it. If you want to continue from where I left off. Okay, cool. So we're going to start from here. Now, notice it's just a Unity application with a gitignore file. I added a gitignore file. If you actually click in there, we are ignoring builds. We don't want our builds folder, so you have to rebuild everything when you get this thing. So what does that mean? Well, let's open up Unity again. So I'll go to Unity. And if we pull up Unity, you're going to see like you can actually open up the file if you download it by clicking Open and selecting the actual Unity application that we just downloaded. Or you can, if you've been following along, just click this thing to open it. This option, the first option. When you open it, it's going to look just like you left it if you saved the scene properly. And we're going to give Unity a second for it to open as it's recalculating everything. I'm going to close some of these things off. I also have my Xcode still open, as well as my iPhone 8 Plus simulator. And I'm doing that because I don't want to waste time reopening this thing, because we're going to use our iOS simulator again. All right, so there's my hello world. You can see that it's an iPhone, and we're going to bring this down to the right size. This is what it should look like, right? Hello world, click me. But we haven't wired it up yet. And what we need to do this, like we talked about last time, is we need to create a script. Now, there's two places you can put a script. You can put a script on a button, but you can also put a script on something called the app controller. Okay, so let's say I want to have all my scripts on one place. Remember, a script is not like a view controller. In the past, when we were using Xcode, we had a view controller, and the script had to be connected to the UI. Not so in this case. So I want to create a new empty game object. So I'm going to go right here and make a new empty. And I'm going to rename this thing, instead of game object, it's going to be called app controller. It's just an empty object. It doesn't matter. It's a container for my script. I'm going to add a new component, right? And actually, there's two ways to do this. I prefer it this way. If you go to scripts first, and if you right-click, I want to make a new C# script. The C# script, I'm going to call this the click me button behavior, or click me button controller. One of the things you want, click me button behavior. It's my click me button. Now you can have more than one event here. You just don't have to have the click me. You can have other events. All right. If I double click, remember what we did was before we specified under Unity, from a preferences perspective, you can choose whatever external editor you want. Right now, I'm using MonoDevelop. If you're a PC person, you can use Visual Studio, or you can use Visual Studio Code or another editor, okay? But right now, I'm using MonoDevelop. So if I double-click here on the script, it'll bring up MonoDevelop, which is bundled alongside with Unity. And it's a very simple editor. It does give you pretty good code hinting. And it's cross-platform. It'll work on Windows and Mac. Right? So what it gives you is it gives you the following script. Now, this is an unattached script because we haven't attached it yet to anything, right? We do need to add another using statement. Using statements are like imports, like I said before. So if we're going to use Unity engine.ui, that's what we want, because we want to access UI elements, right? On the top, we're going to have some public instance variables. We can talk about making them public or private another time if we need to. For now, let's just notice that they need to be public. If they're public, they'll appear inside the inspector if they're public, right? If they're private, they won't appear in the inspector. So if I call this public, I want to make 2 of them this time, as opposed to 1 last time. One of them is going to be called the public click me button. It's going to be a type button, and it's going to be the click me button. That's the first one. We're also going to make a public text object called the hello world label. So 2 objects, a button and a text object. A little different than last time. I don't need my update because it's not a game object that I'm going to update every frame. So I can delete that. I do need my start event because what I'm going to do is I'm going to add an event listener in there. And then I need an actual event handler. So I'm going to call this thing a public, which returns void. Sorry, I'll wait till this updates. Public, which returns void, and it's going to be called the click handler. You can call this click handler or just click, or you can call it click me button click, whatever you want. What I wanted to do is go to my this.hello label, the hello world label, and I want to change the text object to say clicked. That's what I wanted to do. This is the click event handler. That's what this does. Okay. So far, so good. Nothing too crazy. Now, this is the part that I missed last time. What you need to do is you need to do this. You have to say the click me button. So you can actually use this keyword if you want. Click me button dot on click dot add listener. And you can point to the listener, which is this dot click handler. Like this. So what this does is it adds the logic for you to connect your button to the actual script. That's what it does. I'm adding an event listener to the button that allows me to click the button. When I click the button, it's going to trigger this script right here, which is just going to change the label. That's all it's going to do. Okay, cool. So we've got this little script, but it's completely unattached. And what we want to do is we want to attach the script to an object. So here's my app controller. I want to click add component, and I want to go to where it says scripts. I'm going to choose this click me button behavior script. Notice that immediately in the inspector, whatever I made public appears here. My click me button and my hello world label. Those 2 things right here. Okay. So in my canvas, I have those 2 things, right? I have those 2 things in my canvas. I have my hello world label. Here's my hello label. I'm just going to pass it in here. And I also have my click me button. Here's my click me button. Pass that in there as well. Now to test it, before we put it up on the iOS device, we can actually test it locally by pressing this plus button or this go button here. Right? This is the test button or the build button, if you will. If I click it, and if everything goes well, I should be able to go here. And if I click it, this is the performance I want. I want to be able to go here, and when I click the button, right? Run this again. When I click this button or press the button, I want it to change to click. That's what I want the behavior to be. Now, are you with me? Okay, good. Now let's rebuild. So I'm going to go to File, Save Scene, File, Build and Run. Now, if you've done this before, it's going to build and run. If you're doing it for the first time because you downloaded my script, you need to go to Build Settings again, choose iOS, update all this stuff, and then click on Build. And when you build, you have to target where you're building, like we showed you before. But for me, all I have to do is build and run. And if I go build and run, it's going to rebuild my project, right, with the new script. Now, I want to show you the script, what it looks like when we build it in iOS. And then we're going to build it right away in Android. I'm going to make another build for Android to show you the cross-platform application here. Now, this is a very simple example, of course, but you get the idea, right? That's what I want you to understand. All right, so we're kicking off Xcode. Here it is. It's coming. It's going to start again. And here's my Xcode project. Here's my Unity iPhone project. It's coming up. And it's bringing up Xcode. There it is. It's rebuilding it. There we go. And it's got about some deltas. It's only taking care of the deltas, only the changes. Because it already exists, the build is a lot faster, right? The first build scaffolds out the application and makes it so that you can add the defaults, the defaulted build. Now what this has done is just modified it. Signing the project, and it's going to run in the emulator or the simulator. And now we should see the same thing we saw before, except with a button and a label. And we should be able to press on the button and change the label, just like that. So if I click the Click Me button, then we should be able to change the label. So we have iOS application functionality here. All right, this is cool. I like it. I do like it. But this is not the power of Unity. The power of Unity is let's make it in Android too. Now, in order for you to do this, and I don't know what emulator you've been using in Android. There's two ways. You can plug in your phone, your Android phone, okay? Or you can use something called Genymotion, which I highly recommend, okay? I don't know if you guys are using Genymotion at all, but you get it from here. Let me just bring it up for you guys, all right? So Genymotion, it's spelled like this, and it's a free Android emulator. You can sign in, you can use it for free for personal use. Okay, here it is. Notice it says trial, or you can actually create an emulator. I recommend it's probably better than the Android built-in emulator in Android Studio. So if you're going to make an Android app for your capstone, it's a pretty good one to use. All right. So I'm just going to take this. I'm going to put this on Slack, because this is what I'm going to be using. Okay, there's my Slack. And you can see that this is Genymotion. It's kind of really cool. What Genymotion does is when you download and install it, it actually creates a VM. All right, so it uses VirtualBox to create a VM for your simulator, which runs, in my opinion, much faster than the Android application emulator. All right, Android Studio. So to show you what it looks like, if you don't have it, it looks like this. If I bring up Genymotion, you download Genymotion. Notice it says Genymotion for personal use down here. That's the one I'm using. I basically signed up with a free account. That's what I've done. And I've created my own profile. So I've got this preview of a Google Pixel 8, right? That's what it is, running API 26. Okay. And I'm just going to run it. I'm going to have it in the background. I'm going to run both my emulators. Okay. So it might be a little slow. Bear with me. All right. So I'm starting my new emulator, and it's going to start a new virtual device, and it's asking me to update. Sure, I'll update for a second while you guys are downloading Genymotion. I didn't do this earlier, but hey, no problem. Meanwhile, while it's doing this, let's prepare Unity, right? So what do I got to do to change this from Unity? Right now, we've got our iPhone emulator running. I want to make another build. So I'm going to go to File, Build Settings. And now I'm going to retarget it from iOS. I'm going to choose Android. Okay. Now, I have to caution you. In order for you to use this, I'm just going to switch out for a second before I do this. Under Unity, under Preferences, you must, under External Tools, you must put in the locations of your SDK and your JDK. All right, it's down in here. So again, I went to Unity Preferences, External Tools, and I targeted my SDK and my JDK. If you don't do this, and again, you want to target the one that is for Android Studio, the one that you're already using for Android Studio, and your JDK, which is usually under Library, Java, on Mac, Java Virtual Machines, and again, I've got my JDK version 8, I believe, 8.0121 as of this recording, under Contents Home. And once you have these configured, then I can retarget my solution. I can go File, Build Settings, and I can target Android. I also want to go to Player Settings. Now this is going to be somewhat similar. Notice it says Centennial College, but my product name is iOS Demo. I want to change this product name from iOS Demo this time to Android Demo, right? Not really a big deal. Under here where it says my com.companyname.product name, I got to change all this again. So I'm going to say ca.centennial, similar to what we did with iOS, college.android demo. And notice that it's targeting something like level 16 Jelly Bean. No, 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 no. This is no good, okay? No one's going to run Jelly Bean right now. Let's target something better like Marshmallow, all right? Like API 23. All right. So that's one part. The other part is, and if you look at some of this other stuff, the target API is automatic, which is the highest you've installed. Now this has to match the stuff that you've used in your Android Studio. So in Android Studio, you probably downloaded a bunch of APIs. Which one is the one you're using with Victor? Anyone know? What's your Android API you're using with Victor? 26? Yeah, so again, I'm choosing 23. So anywhere between 23 and up, you're okay. You don't have to use the latest one, but 23 and up is pretty cool. All right. All right. So now that I have this going, I want to make sure that there's nothing else I need. Now notice that it says Android TV compatibility. Let's uncheck this, please. And we're not going to make an Android game. Let's uncheck that too. We're not making an Android game. We're making an application, right? Internet access is auto, write permission internal. You can see that there is the same options that we had before. Our publishing settings allows us to use a key. Right now we're going to leave it unsigned and so on. If you want to, you can sign it up later. Okay, there's my resolution and so on. One thing to note is I want to switch platform. So click on here. I want you to click switch platform, which switches it from iOS to Android. Now this is key because if you don't do this, over here on my aspect, I want to choose something that's reasonable, right? Like you can see that it's a portrait, and you want to choose something like that's pretty comparable to what we just used, like something like 1280 by 800 or 1024 by 600, something like that, right? But you want to make it so that it's, instead of landscape, it's portrait, like this. Okay, so that's kind of the scale you want, roughly around the same size of the device you're gonna attempt to put this on. Now, what I want to do is I want to save my scenes. I'm going to go File, Save Scenes, and what I want to do is I want to build and run. But before I do the build and run, I want to build first. I always want to build first the first time. So I'm going to click Build. It's going to ask me to choose a build folder. I'm going to go to Build, but instead of iOS Demo, I'm going to make something called Android Demo. So another platform. I'm going to click Save. And what this is going to do, if you've done everything correctly, if you have Android, your API installed, your Java installed, and pointing to the right location, right? What this will do is we'll attempt to build an APK, right? The same kind of stuff that you would build in Android, okay? Now remember, we have Genymotion running in the background, and I want to show you what it looks like here. This is done. Let's start my virtual device while this is running. Oh, by the way, we also have our iOS simulator up running at the same time, so I'm really just chugging along with my memory usage. Now, if I also have a Android device I can test with here as well, and it's pretty cool how fast it is. Now, I want you to see that this is much faster running Android, even with all the stuff I'm doing. Here he goes. Look, here's my simulator coming up, or my emulator. This is why I prefer Genymotion. Okay, it's much, much faster coming up, and it's a separate VM, right? It's not something that's tied into the JVM that you get from Android Studio. Although I have to say that Android Studio has improved a lot over the years. Their emulator is much better than before, right? In the past, it was unworkable, unusable. You couldn't use it at all. It was just no good. Nowadays, they've made it much better. I think JetBrains has really worked hard to improve it. And there's other ones. There's not just Genymotion. There's a lot of other virtual machines you can download. These are like virtual appliances. That's what they're like, right? So it makes it look and feel like a real phone. You can actually use Genymotion alongside with Android Studio, and it works really, really well. So it emulates a phone almost exactly. So it's chugging along because I'm 80% memory usage here. So there we go. Here's my Android device. It's pretty much started with the latest version. It's kind of, using Google Pixel. Here we go. This is it. So my Android device is ready. Now we're just waiting on Unity. While it's finishing its build. And of course, I'm going to rebuild it in a second. And it's going to launch it on Android. All right, cool. Look, the APK is done. So I could just transfer it to Android like normal, but I'm just going to rebuild. So I'm going to do again, I'm going to go back to here. And let's just make it so that it's small again. I'm going to go to build and run. And what this is going to do now is it's going to, if there's no deltas, it's going to do this thing right on the device, right? As you can see. Let's take a look at Android Studio here and see, and at Genymotion and see what it works. So Genymotion to me, it's one of my favorite build tools that I use, right? Again, some people use other things, right? So I think it's like, maybe you don't like Genymotion. Maybe you like the one that's built into Android Studio. That's fine too. But the best, of course, is always running it on the phone. You can see true compatibility. I'm just impatient. That's why I move this around. It's my fault. All right, here's deploying. And got it. Here's Unity and good. That's the simulator. If I click me, then we're good to go. So now you see that I've got apps running on both Android and iOS, and they're virtually identical, right? So let me see if I can bring up the emulator. If I still have it up, do I? Let's put them side by side. So I want you guys to see this for all of its glory. Right, so there it is. So there's this Android demo, and here's iOS demo, and you can see that they are identical. Right? Questions, guys? This is the time that you can see what I'm talking about. I mean, again, this is a very simple, stupid app. All it does is a click me button and a label. But this is when we start all apps, right? We start with buttons and labels and different things. Remember, you can draw stuff. You can put images in here. It's compatible. Now, one thing we didn't check on my device is if I want to shift my device to the side, will it adapt? And it adapts pretty good. Like, I mean, that's not bad for no, I haven't put any kind of constraints. It adapts pretty good, right? And it'll do the same thing for the Android. I'm just not going to do it right now because I believe this device, if I'm not wrong, doesn't switch. I'm also using the trial version of Genymotion. Let's switch this back. So there we go. All right, so there we go. So we have a very simple application running on both devices. Again, why do we use Unity today? Not to build a game. We use Unity for prototyping. And I think this is a great tool for you guys, especially for your capstone project. One thing I'd like to do is I want to take a look before we go. I want to take a look at our Xcode project just for a second and see what it looks like when we did that event handler. So we did the event handler. Where the heck would it be, right? Because it's in here somewhere. Here's our classes. And you can see that we have a bunch of things in here, right? But where is the analog? Where's the stuff that we're going to have to connect? So we've got our user interface. Here's our user interface, right? You see that this is all C and C++, right? This is what this whole thing is. You can see that this stuff is all here. Some Unity ads. Here's our data. And under our data, under resources, there's managed. Here's mono. This is all the machine configuration, right? So where the heck is our stuff? Like, it's got to be in here somewhere, because it does convert it kind of one for one, right? I mean, you write some code and it's got to be in here somewhere. So where would it be? Our products. And we see that there's a new app, right? And if you notice, one thing is that there is no direct access to the code, right? And because what happens is that Unity has created an app. This is our Unity target new app, this one right here. And what's happened is Xcode has created a wrapper, a C++ wrapper around the app. So it launches it inside of a player. That's what it does. So really what's happening is you have another layer of abstraction. The app container itself is on the outside. By the way, it's the same thing with Android. So you don't have direct access to code the app in Xcode like we did before, right? So there's a level of abstraction where it allows you to create this. Here's our product. It's called Unity Target New App, right? And you can see that it's just a binary file. That's what this thing is. And then what we're doing is we're wrapping stuff around this thing. We're wrapping our application by using C++ and so on, and the target classes. All right, so this is our data. And you can see that in here we have some resources, but none of this makes sense. If I actually look at some of this stuff, you're going to see that there's nothing in here for you. Okay, so I just wanted to take a look at that with you guys. Again, I'm using my Genymotion player, right, which is really, really cool. And it's an emulator for Android. I'm just going to close this one down, just so I don't kill my resources. Let's just kill this. One thing to note is inside of Unity, here's my Unity, it doesn't care. If I want to do another build, again, I can go to build settings and I can target another build altogether. If I want to make this app available on the web, at the same time, I click WebGL, and now it's going to be available on the web, a web page, right? Okay, I'm not going to do that here because that would be very bad. Too many builds for now. And if I ever want to switch back to iOS, I can just go to build settings. And if I go back to iOS, and you can see that I can click on switch platform. I have to do that every single time. And when I click switch platform, I can go back to player settings after it recompiles the scripts. Go to player settings, and I got to make sure that this stuff has been retained. Like, notice it changed to Android demo because I changed my product name. Obviously, we're going to call this something more neutral, like demo, right? Which makes sense instead of like Android or iOS demo. But in my other settings, we should see all the changes we had made before preserved. None of this changed. This just changed the scale so you can see what it looks like. And we can add other components in here like images, sliders, all that kind of stuff. I want to point out that the Unity documentation is great. All right, so if you go to Unity 3D, and if I want to go on the top, there's a Learn button, right? A link, and it has amazing tutorials to teach you how to make games, as well as specific topics on user interface. Right, so if you wanted to find things on UI, it's here, as well as mobile and touch. Right, so there's user interface. You want to learn how to do stuff with a UI. Mobile and touch commands. It tells you how to, add multi-touch, accelerometer input, pinch to zoom, and other options here. How to build and test your applications, and a bunch of other ones. All right, so really, really cool demos here and lots of really cool little tutorials to get you guys going. Right now, this is for building games, but the ideas are the same for building user interfaces. Also, from a documentation perspective, click on documentation. They have the scripting documentation. So if you want to know how to do things like under 2D, if I want to go to UI, and I want to do something like a canvas layout, it'll talk about the canvas on the right-hand side, explain in detail how to draw order of elements, render modes. It'll give you some really cool, these are little cool panels that you can download. If I want to make a panel like this instead of my cheesy panel that I made, it is included in standard assets. One of the really cool things about Unity, if I go back to Unity for a second, is that it also has some assets. I can import different kinds of assets. I can import a package, and notice that some of the packages are 2D. There's also effects, environment, particle systems, utility, and a bunch of other stuff. If I'm not wrong, under utility, it might be under utility or somewhere else. We'll find it for you. Let's go to utility. And what does it have here? Prefabs. I don't think it's here, but we can also download user interface stuff. Yeah, no, this isn't the one I want. Let's try asset. They always change things around a little bit. Over the past little while, they've really changed a lot of this. But I can also go to the asset store. This is really cool. So if you ever want to kind of add in your own things, but you're not an artist and you want to find some buttons and different UI elements, if I click on Window Asset Store, and I'm not sure if it'll connect me today because I'm doing so many things. If it doesn't, it might work for you. It's definitely not working for me because I've got like 71% of memory. Oh, there it goes. So one of the great things about the using Unity and Unreal has Marketplace, Unity has Asset Store. And I can search for things like UI. So if I search for UI, and notice that I can search for packages that are paid as well as packages that are free. And you can see that I can grab some user interface stuff right from here. Scripting UI for my UI switcher. You can also look for mobile, as well as if you want to. Unity technology has a lot of stuff for free. So if you look at Unity technologies, and if I click onto this thing, so only Unity technologies, then what you'll see is all the packages that Unity themselves have put up for free, which is quite a few of them actually. So there is the Cinemachine. They always add new stuff. Space Shooter, roguelike examples. Let me see if I can find one that's really cool. My Sprite Pack for 2D. AR Kit for AR. You want to try that? AR application. And I know they have some UI stuff too. And I want to see if I can find this for you. So that way you can Unity Ads, Viking Village, Asset Store Tools, a Flappy Bird clone. You want to try some of this stuff out. It's really cool. And you can learn a lot from downloading some of these free tools from the Asset Store. Here it is. Extra UI skins. All right, let's see what this means. So I wonder if there's more up here first before I check down there. So I wonder if I put in UI up here, if I filter further. So if I put UI, and will this help me filter some of the stuff that I want? Here it goes, Unity UI samples. Perfect. This is the one we wanted. Look. So here it is, Unity Essentials. If I go to this one, and that's what we saw, right? This Unity UI samples. I want these panels, right? If you click download, I can import mine because mine are importable. And what this does is it'll add its own materials and fonts and everything else immediately in here. And some default scenes as well. Here's some default scenes. so you can test them. So I'm going to click import. And what this does is it adds these new packages to your application to test. So it gives you some tools and some stuff to create your sample user interfaces, which is kind of cool. Now, this is an older package. It says this is compatible with Unity's older version of Unity 4.6, but it still works with more some of the stuff that's included in Unity today. Because all we care about is how the panels look here. So the asset store, really powerful. One of the greatest selling features of Unity is you can actually sell your own stuff on the asset store. So if you're an artist and you like to make user interfaces, buttons, scripts, if you're a great developer, you can sell your own stuff on the Unity asset store, and Unity allows that, right? So that's really cool. There are people who only do that. They only make assets for the Unity store. And then basically other developers or people who want to make quick games can download and install them in their project. So I'm going to just close this tab for now because I've got everything I want. So what it did was it added a bunch of extra stuff. One of the things it did was it added textures and shaders, if I'm not wrong. Here's our lit textures and sprites. Here we are. And there's also, it added some models. So some kind of flyers, some prefabs. This is neat. It added a slider, a title, a toggle, and it also added some different buttons. So under prefabs, if you look at prefabs, it added some stuff, which is kind of neat, right? Here's my SF button. So instead of my poor button that I have in here, I've got my poor button, which is click me button. I can add in an SF button. So I'll put this in here. And let's see how this looks now if I zoom in, right? And let us put this a little bit higher so you can see what it looks like, a nicer button, right? So instead of it looking like the ugly button we had, we can make it look like this. I can change the size of my SF button. So let's move this one down. So I'm going to make this one kind of move down. And instead of it saying settings, I can rename this button to whatever I want. So let's get rid of this click me button as an example. So we'll just delete it. And this button here, which is this SF button, you notice that there's a background. Here's my background color. You can change this, right? And I can also go back into the label itself. So instead of it saying settings, I can say, just like we said before, click me. Now it's pretty small, right? Because remember, we're making it on iOS devices or even on larger devices. So notice that there's the width of our button is 250 by 70. If I want to make it bigger, so let's make it like 320 by 100. And I can change the size of my label to match. So now the background is important. This background is what's happening there, but the label itself is the label size, so the width and the height. One thing to note is this thing, font size is 36. Let's make it something bigger, like 50, maybe even more. Maybe make it 60. There we go. So we can see the object. The font is a different font. It's using Jupyter, right? See Jupyter font? Because they included a font with their stuff. All right, so we've got rid of my button. I'm going to fix my project in a second. And here's my hello world. My hello world is kind of a cheesy label, right? Let's get rid of that too. And instead of my hello world being in there, let's drag and drop from the prefabs folder a title. I'm going to drag and drop the prefabs folder in here under my canvas. Here's my SF title. Let's zoom in there so we can see where that is. It's way at the top. Let's bring it way to the bottom here. And we'll zoom up. So we'll just kind of click this and move in here. Now, if you notice, it's adding this interesting control, this UI demo, right? So it's pretty big. It's centered. And the great thing about the title, this is the SF button. We're going to call this the Click Me button. So click me, like we did before, Click Me button. That's what it's called. And the SF title, we're going to call the Hello World. Hello label. Let's call it Hello label like before. That's what this thing is. Okay, again, just like before, this Hello label has a background and a title label. The title label, instead of saying GUI demo, we can just say Hello World, but making it right. There we go. And we want to make the Hello label container a little bigger. Let's make this 100 from a high perspective, right? Maybe more, maybe 150. Make it really big, 150. You can see that it just stretches. It's actually a vector graphic, which is pretty cool. And we can go inside of our title label and change this to the size to something like 80 or more. Or make it 90. There we go. It's kind of compatible with what we kind of had before. And if you look at the game itself, it looks like this. Now, there's a blue background. You know what? I don't want this blue background. To change this, we can change the main camera. Under the camera, right now, we have this solid color. And if I'm not wrong, we might have a background texture. Let's take a look. These are all, you know, predefined. Here's a UI panel. There we go. So I want to get a preview of this UI panel, and I wonder if I can bring it up here so you can see it. It looks like this. It's kind of like this squarish panel. All right, that's one of them. How about a lit UI? There's a rounded. Here it is. SFUI. SFUI. Yeah. And it has a background. It has a background. And in my background, I have this background scene. There's also other ones that I can choose. So pretty cool. And they have animations and a bunch of other stuff here. I'm not going to go too crazy. I'm just going to change the background so that it's not this blue color. We'll make it so it's a darker blue or some other kind of color, so it kind of doesn't hide this. So maybe something like, maybe something else. Maybe a yellow. Something that that kind of doesn't clash with the blue. Yellow and blue kind of are complementary colors. They kind of work together, but I wanted to make sure that it looks completely different. Still kind of ugly, in my opinion. Yeah, maybe an orange. Orange and blue, yeah. Woo, Tom, you're good. Not. Okay, now everything is messed up because even though I've made it kind of orange and blue, just to make it look different, one thing to note is we've messed up our app controller. Our app controller is missing some button and text, right? We have to repoint everything. So because we've changed the hello label, we got to drag and drop this again. And now notice that, let me undo that change. It's the title label that has to change because the title label itself is a UI container. So this is this part. And the button itself, so if I go back to my Click Me button, this is the button. And you can see that I've got a script and everything else. So in my app controller, I got to take this new Click Me button and drag that in there as well. Otherwise, it'll never work. Now we'll test locally to see if that it works and see that it's okay. Because if it doesn't work, what the heck? Like, why would we put this to Android or iOS, right? So now it's spinning. Let's make sure that this is the right size. This is what it looks like. And if I click on my Click Me button, and it says clicked. So the functionality is there again, right? Cool. Now let's redeploy to iOS and see what it looks like. And then we're done. I swear. First, we'll file save scene, and then we'll file save project. And I know this is a really ugly project, but it's just an example of what you can do with some interesting sprites. Again, just to make sure we're in the right settings, we're clicking iOS, and we're going to click on build and run. build, and run. So again, we're targeting iOS demo. We're going to replace because we've changed our iOS. And it's taking its time to figure out the deltas, the changes only. And then it's going to go through and replace only the stuff that it needs to replace, hopefully. And then we should see an app that's compatible with what we had before, with an orange background and those different buttons. Again, something else we could have done is made a white background with the blue buttons. That would have been cool too. You know, but I just chose orange just to make it so I show you it's different. So this will take a little bit of time to change. But the asset store is a really cool thing, man. There's a lot of stuff you can download from the asset store and include in your app. Especially from a prototyping perspective, you want to try some buttons, some stuff. People have made a lot of free objects that there's nothing for you to do. You can just position everything. You get an idea of what you want your app to look like in your mind. And instead of using UI UX tools only, you can go directly with Unity and it'll do your prototyping for you, which is more of an interactive prototype. Now, I still don't recommend you don't wireframe. I think it's important for you guys to wireframe first, get an idea of what you're going to build, and then go and build a prototype. Again, nothing's wrong with using web tools, but even faster than web tools, because you don't have to think about an Ionic app, right? Downloading an Ionic app and making it work is something like this with Unity, because now you're cooking. I can actually, create my app. I can make my app. I can do everything I need to do. And it's very, very straightforward. It's just the changes you have to do one time. As soon as you do the changes one time, you should be good to go. We want to change this. It's just change from a blue background when we're done. When we're finished, it should change to an orange background. And let's see when this works finally. That kind of didn't work. Are we running two versions of it? Let us try that again, because that kind of didn't work out. I wonder if, and this is just me, I wonder if I have to redo it. So if I go back to Unity, and if I choose build and run, if I'm going to delete this, move to trash first, and then let's just get rid of this, close my Xcode project, and then rerun this when I do my build, because that might be much better than running it over top, because I've changed so much. I've changed my assets and so on. And sometimes the one's a little faster too. So I don't know. I know some of you are doing both iOS and Android apps, and this might be a great way of prototyping. I know some of you are just doing, who's just doing Android? Some of you for Capstone, some of you are just doing Android. So that's okay. Again, nothing wrong with prototyping here in Android, right? So you can make a quick app with Android and check it out, see if it works. And then you're like, hey, wait, maybe I can check this out in iOS. And it doesn't cost you a lot, right? You already have a Mac. Let's see what it looks like in iOS. I'm never gonna, maybe your build isn't going to include an iOS app this time around. It's okay. You can check it out. It's not going to hurt you, right? There's no coding. You can code everything in Android and then test it in both platforms. And it also might help you make decisions in terms of how it's going to look. You look at it and go, doesn't look quite right in the emulator. What is this going to really look like when I code it with Android Studio? I have to say, though, to be honest, Android Studio, if you're using Java in Android Studio, it's pretty quick. Okay, it's pretty damn quick. I mean, literally, it is a drag and drop interface, and you're good to go in kind of short order. iOS is a little bit trickier. iOS requires a little bit more work, and that's why sometimes from a prototyping perspective, you want to put things together. For example, let's say you're putting together a map application, right? Some kind of thing that has a map. Maybe you don't want to have a working map, but just a prototype, so it looks like a map. And you make an image, put it together, you send it on your application itself, right? By the way, I'm not saying you can't make a map work, right, with iOS. You can totally do it. There are plugins that you can use so that you can create a mobile app that includes a map, right? But it's just far easier to go native in that particular case. It does have accelerometer support. There's a lot of touch apps and gestures you can do with Unity. But again, for a quick prototype that looks like the product that you want and launches in an emulator or a simulator, I think Unity is another good solution. And one day, when this thing actually launches, and we'll see what we will see, if it actually is going to work in the new version. All right, after this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it up on GitHub, so you guys have this example project, and you can always use this as a reference if you want to try stuff on your own. Just a note also, because you've made your 2 games, one of the 2 projects, your assignment number 1 and assignment number 2, you made 2 games with me this semester. You made a slot machine and you made this little side-scrolling app, right? Challenge for you guys is thinking about this. Could you remake that app with Unity, right? So if you made your little iOS app, right, and you put it in Unity, now that's the real power, especially when it comes to games. Far, far, far better sometimes to make it purely with Unity and not code it at all native in the beginning, right? And then you have an app that works both on iOS and Android, again, right? Which you can almost deploy immediately, which is kind of cool. All right, did we finish building or what? I cannot tell. I think it's still working. And again, I'm probably killing myself with this build right now. Probably because I have everything open, and that's what's causing me to have some issues. There's my iOS demo here. Build completed with result of succeeded. Okay, where is my run? It said build and run, didn't I not? Oh, come on. I said build and run, not just build. Did I say build? I can't remember. All right, guys. So hopefully this won't take long. This actually replaces. All right, so I'm going to, so here's the problem when it comes to your terminal window. I talked about using your terminal window to do stuff. If I look at Unity now, wait, it's finally going to work? No way. All right, come on. Come on. The file Unity iPhone code project does not exist. Yay, that just totally failed. Yeah, because I probably redid the project, so I won't launch. Let's see if it just works from here. How about that? Hey, manual. I just manually did it. Yay. I fooled it because yeah. That's pretty cool. All right. Yeah, so what I was saying was that if you look at when Unity's open, if I do a list command, what sometimes you'll see is a lot of meta files. So if I go into assets, and if I look at assets, you can see that there's these meta files. These meta files, a lot of times when Unity's open, will not be sent up to GitHub and close Unity before we put things up on GitHub. Just FYI. It's the one pain in the ass for me. Whenever I work with GitHub, with Unity, anything, I always have to close it down before I put it up on GitHub, which is kind of sucky. again, Unity has some really great other tools as well. One thing to note for those people who are interested is that Unity has something called Colab, which is a collaborative cloud tool, right? Which is kind of cool. I'm not sure that it comes free anymore with the personal edition, but what it allows you to do is put up your project up on the cloud, right? Which is kind of cool. So you can test it live. I'm not going to do that here, but it's like a GitHub repo, but it actually tests your project live on the cloud. It's great for games. Another thing that Unity does for people who want to make multiplayer games is it gives you your own free network. It actually allows you to play up to, I believe, 20 players simultaneously, which is really cool. So that's like a really good service for free. It doesn't cost anything to anybody, right? You can also make your local multiplayer games. I believe it allows you to make as many as you want local. So that's really cool. So you can make as much kind of local multiplayer kind of environment that you want. I think it's here. All right, let's take a look at the simulator. Does it make it orange? Come on, simulator. Yes. It's my ugly orange color. And if I click on this click me button, it should say click. So we can see that even with these funky colors, although this is kind of weird. I'm not sure if I like this effect because when you click onto something, then it creates a different kind of effect. I think this is kind of weird too. This is something that I didn't think about when I made this, right? I didn't center it along with the button itself, which is something that I could have done differently. Yeah. So again, live and learn, I think, is the answer. That's upside down. I think we, I mean, again, tools that we can use. Okay, that's it for me, guys. Again, next week we'll resume our regular program. That was my extras, if you will, for this semester. We did something like a little bit extra add-ons. But next week, expect that we're going to get right into iOS development again with frameworks. I was going to start with the map framework, but I think I'm going to start with something simpler next week. So look forward to things like notifications. I think that's a really important part of iOS, how to send notifications. So we're going to do that next week. Okay. And that's it for me.